Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler Selhorn, and welcome to another episode of Speak Easy, the podcast where we discuss communication, productivity systems, capturing our thoughts, and how we share those thoughts with our future selves and others. We believe that managing our brains is core to 21st century work, and we're here to learn how to do it better than we did yesterday. Thanks so much for listening. Speak Easy is brought to you by Cleft, the easiest way to collect your thoughts. With our cross-platform applications, you can simply capture your ideas wherever you are and paste them where they belong later. Today, we are blessed to be learning out loud with Meighan O'Toole. Meighan has been running her own consulting business for over a decade, and this year she's taken a new direction by focusing on Notion. She's here to share her expertise in knowledge management, productivity, project management, and building effective knowledge systems. Meighan's journey didn't start there. She's a true operations nerd with a background in social media, marketing, and community management. Her impressive career has taken her through Yahoo, Wikia, now known as Fandom, and Wired Magazine as a pioneer in social media production. Now based in her hometown of Boston after a decade-long stint in San Francisco, Meighan balances her passion for technology with a love for creative pursuits. When she's not helping clients navigate the digital landscape, you might find her sewing, knitting, painting watercolors, or whipping up something delicious in the kitchen. What really sets Meighan apart is her enthusiasm for internet culture and her mission to demystify technology for others. She's known for bringing a sense of calm to chaotic situations and helping people overcome their tech anxieties. Welcome to the show, Meighan. Meighan, we're excited to tap into your knowledge and hear your insights. We're curious, how did you get interested in knowledge management using technology?
Hey, Tyler. Thank you so
Hey.
much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with
It's
you.
a blast to be talking with you. Yes.
So for me, knowledge management really started in my teens, even before I knew about the internet or computers. I started carrying a 4x6 notebook around with me, and I would write notes in it and ideas, and I would clip magazines and fabric. And that kind of followed me for about 15 years into my 30s. And then when I moved to San Francisco and I started learning about technology, I found Evernote, and that was sort of my first sort of productivity tool that I found.
That hipster PDA to Evernote pipeline was very robust during that time.
Yes,
for sure.
I did have a PDA actually.
Okay, so there's a jumping off point in between our note cards and Evernote. Okay.
I can't.
Oh, Palm Pilot.
Yeah, Palm Pilot. So I moved
go.
from my notebook to a Filofax, then to a Palm Pilot, and then to the cloud, to Evernote. And
there it is.
And, I just started realizing like more and more, it was so much easier for me to capture information on the go. And once I got an iPhone in 2008, I was off and running. So
yeah, having that internet communicator turned out to be the most important pillar of the original iPhone's launch, right? That was kind of like the side light when we, wanted to say it's a phone and it's this and it's that. But that internet communicator part was so crucial, especially if you're going to start using tools like Evernote, right?
But you know what? I need to amend because I'm getting ahead of myself. I didn't start using.
That's all right.
I didn't start, and the internet always remembers. I did not start using Evernote until 2010. So I don't want to say I was using it in 2008, although I was using Twitter. Okay. So knowledge management really didn't become important to me until around then. And even then it wasn't super front of mind. It was more like to capture articles. I was really into save it later apps. Mm-hmm. But now with all of the information, I feel like in the past 5 years, this is what I focus on, is really helping people find the knowledge in their businesses, because we're just inundated with so much information. And so really helping people, to find things is, and to save time too, right? Not spend, because it's like death by a million paper cuts when you're looking for things in Drive or in your files. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So how do cut through the noise with us, right? How do we find it? How do we find it fast, right? How do we save time by using knowledge management effectively? But what's the secret?
Yeah. So for me, databases, my focus is Notion. I've used Notion since 2018. Mm-hmm. And I think Notion is really what made me start to realize I am a nerd for knowledge management, because their databases are so powerful, because you can connect information across your workspace. So the first thing I really started building knowledge management with was my knowledge base, which is all of my documentation, everything I need to help me understand how to run the business. So if I were to bring in an assistant, I've had a team before, there's documentation in there to do everything in my business. And then from there, I've done stuff with content management, offers and services management. Like I have a database for that, like where my lessons are, the copy is, links to the videos. Yeah. And then I've even extended it into my personal life where I now have databases for all my yarn, all my fabric, so I can easily find it. Like when I'm at the craft store, I can just pick up my phone and be like, oh, I have 2 yards of that. I don't need more. I need navy thread, So yeah, I'm such a nerd
Well,
for it.
nerds, yeah, nerds for knowledge definitely make it easier to be a knitting nerd as well. So that's fantastic. I guess I'm curious to like go back a step, right? Where you're trying to do this like knowledge management, but it's oftentimes like you mentioned web clippers and read it later type stuff. And I guess maybe how do you do the brain clipper, right? Or the grow this idea later stuff? Like, tell us about how you capture your own thoughts.
Yeah. So you might know of this tool called Cleft.
Yes, Speakeasy, brought to you by Cleft. Here we are.
I am a super fan of Cleft, but prior to Cleft, I would use, audio that just was like this word salad. And I have ADHD. And so then looking at this like giant transcript of, my brain dump was just not helpful. And then I discovered Cleft. I don't know, what was it, 6 months ago that you guys soft launched?
Mm-hmm.
I found it through David Pierce's newsletter, The Verge. From The Verge. His newsletter is called The Installer. And I was off and running. I mean, I just was like, holy moly. Like, all I have to do is just say what is ever on my mind, and Cleft then wraps it into a to-do list. Or when I launched a workshop / product in the spring, I was able to say everything that I knew I needed to do for the launch, and it put it all together. And then I could just dragged it right into Notion, and I had all of my tasks to do. So really, I mean, when it comes to quote unquote knowledge management, for me, it truly is about saving time, right? Like I'm constantly thinking about how can I be more efficient? And it's not to work, like, it's not that whole like, bro, let's like rise and grind, right? It's, you know what? I want to spend more quality time with my family. Like, I don't want to work.
Rise and grind your coffee, right? And then enjoy that cup with your family. I like
Totally.
That. Yes.
So yeah, that's where for me, Cleft works really like hand in hand with web clippers. What was the other thing that we were talking about? Oh, read it later. So I use Readwise, so those are like my core tools that really help me capture knowledge. And also, like, for a lot of us, I'm a service provider. I help small businesses with their technology, and I'm able to capture information in a way that I can then share with them.
Right. So shout out to David for calling us the best AI voice notes I've tried, period. Yep. So thank you for David saying that, and also for you clicking on that link. I'm sure there was a hyperlink out in the installer, but maybe you're listening to us today having been brought to us by David as well. But we're really grateful for you giving it a try, and also like seeing the value yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Because, it's one of those things where, we're trying to help people like yourself. Johnny and Justin are identified neurodivergent people. And like you mentioned, your ADHD, and thank you for being willing to be vulnerable and disclose that here on the podcast. Johnny, he'd talked about it before, but like it was his first time like publicly declaring that was on our very first episode. So these are things that are very important to us and are a part of the story of Cleft, is the brain chemistry of individuals. Totally. Like myself, I'm not identified, but there's definitely times when I have that blinking cursor syndrome, right? And that's the place where Cleft helps me the most, is when I have an idea and I don't have the fingers to type it, but I do have the voice to say it, right? Yeah. And I think that's the key ingredient that I find being most useful about Cleft, is just helping me to get from that -1 to 0 or 0 to 1 space, where it's the fastest voice to draft kind of solution that I've found, right? I've tried other apps, like you said, like dictation and those sorts of things before. I don't want all of that transcript. Right. I want the summary, right? That's why it's so useful. And I was hacking together little solutions here and there to do similar
Yeah,
things of
Thomas Frank has
don't
a
give me the
great
whole, don't.
Thomas Frank has a great tutorial on hacking your voice with ChatGPT, and then goes right into Notion. But Cleft just does it so beautifully. And,
Yeah, we're trying to do that
yeah,
clean, right? We're trying to do that in a way that is accessible to you in all the
right,
places, because ChatGPT is building a thing that's trying to get you to have a subscription forever,
right.
right? Like, whereas Cleft's basic plan is pretty generous,
Yeah.
right?
I
And
am a paid
the
subscriber though of Cleft.
well, I highly recommend, if you haven't yet subscribed, please do, because you just mentioned appending
Mhm,
earlier, right? That's one of our paid features where like you've got a note that's kind of rolling
mhm.
through things and you can just kind of keep adding on
Yep.
to it, right? That's a really great way to use Cleft, is to say, okay, I wasn't done with that thought actually.
Yeah,
And so I'm going to add on to
totally.
it, right? With another recording
Yeah.
and another summary, right? And, getting things together that way.
Yeah, and one of the things
Um,
you brought up when you were talking about Johnny being neurodivergent, when he and I first connected on an onboarding call for Cleft, one of the things that we shared that I have found such a relief with Cleft is, for many of us that have ADHD, this is a little bit of a tangent, but there are a lot of people that refuse to say ADHD, they say ADD because they don't like the
mm,
hyperactivity. They don't want to be associated with that. But the reality
mm,
is, it's not that you're hyperactive like physically, it's that your brain doesn't stop, right? So for
yeah,
those of us
yeah.
who are small business owners, entrepreneurs, or have side hustles, our brains are always going. They just don't stop. And so one of the things that Johnny mentioned, and I was like, wow, that is so true, is you just put it into Cleft and it's like your brain can take a sigh because it's no longer just
Yes.
rolling around in there. You've got it and now it's actionable.
Yeah, I think the phrase that I've heard him say before is, it's a release valve,
Yes.
right? There's, so often there can be, a bit too much, right? That hyperactivity that you're talking
Yeah.
about, like, can be adding pressure, right? Slowly over time, and Cleft, and also getting it out to, or whatever your repository happens to be, is so pleasing to that kind of
Yeah, I
mind,
mean, that's one of the things that I
right?
talk to my clients about all the time is the cognitive load that we have from
Hmm.
all of the information that we are carrying around in our heads, right? And when we carry that information, if we have a team or an assistant, they're then relying on us, right? So knowledge management
Hmm.
helps in that way too, that it captures that institutional knowledge in a way that you can release it, you can let it go.
Well, thank you for the invitation to collect our thoughts with Cleft and to empty our brains. Right. We had another previous guest who used the brain dump phrase
Mhm.
earlier as well. And we had a back and forth about whether or not we liked that phrase. And you've already used it. So clearly that's something that's meaningful to you. For me and myself, I'm slowly but surely embracing that, because brain dump to me has this like judgmental, like
Oh, really?
trashy implication to it that it isn't there for anybody else that uses the word. It turns out that was just me. It was just me. But so I've been embracing the brain dump, as it were. But
You could say brain
um,
sweep.
oh yeah, no doubt. Like we are emptying our
Yeah.
brains is the way that
Yeah.
I'm choosing to
Yeah.
say it now. But like brain dump is exactly what you meant
Mhm.
by that. So use that as you prefer. I guess maybe I'm curious to transition to thinking about how this levels up into, you were hinting at like assistants and like other teammates. Like, we've been thinking in the for you and in your own space and your read later
Right.
app and that sort of stuff. How does this become useful when you start involving other people? You were hinting at it, but I'm curious, like, how you think about that when you think about knowledge management being empowering to
Yeah,
others.
I mean, I think it's safe to say many of us have had micromanagers as bosses, right? And nobody likes to be
Mhm.
micromanaged. Nobody likes to have their hand held at
Yeah,
work. For a lot of us, work really gives us meaning, and it feels good, right? To do a good job.
right.
And when you are constantly being told what to do, it can really diminish people. You can lose talent really quickly when you don't give people power to grow, for them to step into their own leadership positions. And knowledge management allows that. It allows the founder, the owner, the manager to step away. And one thing that I want to point out too is that as a founder, owner, you should not be spending time doing that, because you're literally wasting money. So you're paying this person to help you, and then you're in there using your own time. And so knowledge management, right? I'm talking about standard operating procedures, how to's, a to-do list, instructions, that can really help a business, a team, an individual, really empower people.
I'm hearing you rhyming with pink, right? Thinking about the idea of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, right? Those ideas from Daniel Pink.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I thought
So
you meant the singer. I was like, I don't know that song.
No, it's talking about Drive.
Mhm.
Drive is Daniel Pink's book, and he's talked
I'll
about
have
it
to
lots
pick
of
that up.
places.
Yeah.
I'm hearing you echoing that idea that we want to enable people to find their own purpose, express their own power in the organization. Well, it turns out, right, that as soon as you share power with others, that power in the organization
Yes.
grows. Right. The more you were talking about like keeping everything inside your own head, right? And you're carrying that knowledge around inside your head.
Mhm.
Well, if it stays there, the power that comes with that knowledge only resides with you. And instead, we ought to, grab hold of that candle, right? That's already lit for ourselves and light somebody else's candle. Now we have twice as much light as we had
Yep.
before, right? And it didn't mean that my candle went
Yeah.
out, right? It just meant that we
Yeah.
now get to share that power as it grows and expands when we, are willing to say this power is not scarce. We don't need to express this power over
Right.
anybody in that micromanagement sort of way that you were talking about. And instead, right, we're saying, okay, we're going to express this power to and power with and power within our teams,
Totally.
right? To say, okay, this is something that we can achieve together.
Yes. Yeah. I'm just quickly looking up the name of this book because I don't want to mess it up. And of course, I can't find it.
Well, okay, so I referenced Daniel Pink, but I also want to give credit to Brene Brown and Dare to Lead. Those ideas that I'm sharing right there when I'm talking about power over versus power to, with, and within, that is directly from the best PDF on the internet. And if you're looking for it, I will be linking to it in the show notes. But that Dare to Lead is probably the pithiest, most actionable version of her research. And it's embracing these ideas of vulnerability and what it means to show up and be willing to be seen. Like one of the things that happen, why is it that we sometimes choose to keep thoughts and ideas inside of our own head instead of giving them away and writing them down and putting it in an SOP or put it in a set of instructions? Because you're saying to that other person, you can do what I did for. Now that can have some fear or some anxiety in it because now do you need me anymore?
Right.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, maybe not.
Yeah.
Right. And what are you going to do with those feelings? Right. So I think there's some self-discovery that's happening here as well.
For me, my goal is for everybody to have a good time. I really, life is precious. And a lot of people do not like to work. They don't like work because they've had bad experiences. And if somebody is going to come and work for me and with me, I want them to enjoy that time. And so I think it's so important to empower people. And the quote that I wanted to share is from this book called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And it's Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. And there's this quote in it that says, all flourishing is mutual. And I think about that a lot with helping others to grow, helping others to find their own autonomy and not putting yourself on other people. Like just because somebody is going to grow and flourish, like that helps me. It's mutual. So I think about that a lot, that I want to have a good time, right? I want to have a good time at work. I want to have a good time away from work. And it's important to me to dismantle those sort of toxic systems. And that can that can happen with gatekeeping around knowledge, right?
Yep. I'm hearing you referencing things that are very important to me when you're talking about all flourishing is mutual. I'm a high school football coach. And American football for our international listeners. I am an enormous human being. I am 6'4", 260 pounds. Like I am very obviously one of those big people that played a contact sport. That's like, you can just look at me and like, oh, I bet he crashed into people before. Yes, I have. But why I bring that up is that at Snyder Football, we have this phrase called "we, us, ours" over I, me, mine.
Oh, right? I've seen you share that online.
It is definitely a text replacement bit that I put in the comments wherever it belongs, right? And I think it's really important to recognize that at the end of the day, The scoreboard doesn't say my name, it says our name.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the idea that's being expressed that obviously in a whole other
Mhm.
context, right? But this idea that the collective flourishing is much more valuable than the individual flourishing. Obviously, individuals are flourishing if we are
Yeah.
flourishing. There's both happening
Totally.
there.
It's so
But
true.
which things are we going to prioritize? Well, if we prioritize
Yeah.
us, right, I'm going to receive what I need to.
Yes. And another good quote is by Toni Morrison about freedom. And
Yes.
so she says, when you get these jobs that you've been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. This is not just a grab bag candy game. And I think about that. I don't know if that last line is correct, but anyway, I think about that too as well. Like when I'm in a position, like leadership position, I train a lot of teams. It's important for me to help people step into their role of being a leader, right? I think you can hear this a lot in like management training, that like your job is to actually build people up around you to replace you. That's when you've succeeded.
Well, I think that's a little bit of what I have called invitational leadership,
Mm,
right? Where my spouse is a therapist, Megan. And so the idea of having a helping person, a helping relationship,
yeah.
right, is core to just how our family
Yes.
works, right? But this idea that we're going to invite others to choose more than what they've been
Yeah.
and not expressing any judgment
Right.
over whether they choose that or not, but just to say that this is a thing that you could choose to
Right.
do. And very often you'll be surprised at how many people step up and say, yes, I will do
Yep.
that. In fact, thanks for
Yeah.
asking.
Totally.
Right? It's one of those things where if you give the framework and the system around which people will contribute and make decisions and like even measure the work that they're doing, like very often it's going to produce results that iterate the whole thing forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I really believe in that. For me, I want us all to win, right? Like, I want us to all get
Yes.
ahead. And I do not believe in zero sum game, and I know in our culture, right? In American culture, that is drilled in us from the get, winners and losers, and I think that's another reason why I've gotten into systems, because I really want to help dismantle sick systems. It's really important for me
Yeah.
to empower people, and you can do that through systems, right?
Okay, so let's conclude right there, Megan. How do we fix sick systems? What is the medicine for that illness in an organization?
I think some humility is part of it. Bringing in people that have different perspectives can help, because sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you can't see the forest for the trees. You don't know what you don't know, right? So bringing in people that have a different perspective, that might have a different way of thinking about things, I think is truly helpful. One of the things that we have seen, especially since the pandemic, is people don't want to work the way that they've been working, right? And so there's been discussion about bringing your full self to work, right? And so I think the part of creating or dismantling sick systems is figuring out, what are your goals? Where are the bottlenecks, right? What's happening? Like, just getting really humble and honest about what are the results here, and then using technology to help you. But I also think that
Well,
another thing that's super important is having that human in the loop, right? Like, having that person. We can't automate ourselves out of everything, because and I don't want to get into another tangent here, but I was in a program recently where everything was automated, and it like stripped the humanity out of everything. It was like such a not great experience.
yeah. I think that's part of why we're starting, just to bring it back to Cleft, right? And to say goodbye here, is that's why we're taking the prompt from your voice,
Mhm.
right? Like what is it that we're trying to transcribe? What are we trying to summarize? We're trying to summarize your
Yeah.
ideas, right? Not necessarily all these generative. Obviously, we're built on some of those same technologies, but we're not trying to generate something. We're just trying to give you back your best
Yeah.
stuff.
I mean, that's what I love about using Cleft, is I can just like vomit this word salad while I'm lying in bed at night, and it spits out exactly what I need. And even if it's not perfect, I can then go in and edit it a little bit, but it's much better than what came out of my mouth.
Well, shout out to turning our brain vomits into something that is
Brain
an
vomits and dumps.
enjoyable an enjoyable word salad that is nourishing to our body. Thank you. All right, Meighan, it was a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for learning out loud with us.
Thank you, Tyler. This was awesome.
The Speak Easy podcast is brought to you by Cleft, the easiest way to collect your thoughts. With our cross-platform applications, you can simply capture your ideas wherever you are and paste them where they belong later. Check us out at cleftnotes.com. That's CLEFTNOTES.com. Thanks for listening as we think aloud together.